been saying now. But they're not so good at distilling that data into insight. And that's where my research area comes in, which is customer analytics. And to define customer analytics on the next slide, customer analytics combines, it takes customer data and applies analytical insight to it, often advanced analytical techniques like machine learning, to extract these insights and design customer-focused programs that win, serve, and retain customers. What's really important here is designing these customer-focused programs. This isn't an academic exercise. We're not just saying, oh, that's interesting. It's actually taking action based upon what we find about our customers' intents, desires, and emerging behaviors. Now, in terms of the actual techniques that make up customer analytics, I have this pinwheel diagram that Jeff and his team are probably sick of because they've seen me present it many times, but this hopefully is new to many of you. These are the different techniques, the primary techniques that we see in the market, companies using to extract value from their customer data, to extract these insights. Now, I'll just briefly talk through how to interpret this diagram. In green, in the outer circle, we have different potential applications of customer analytics. So if you start at noon and go clockwise through this diagram, first you see contextual marketing, understanding customer context. How do customers feel? Where are customers so we can get the right message to them that meets that contextual reality? Next, almost every business, I would think, is interested in acquiring new customers. So there are customer analytics techniques that help you with customer acquisition. At 6 o'clock on the diagram, there are techniques that help you retain the customers that you have to build loyalty that drives retention. Moving along, we have techniques that help with personalization, that one-to-one experience that many companies are striving to deliver to their customers. And finally, we have techniques that help you understand and improve the customer experience. Now, in blue are 15 different techniques that loosely align with those application areas. For instance, if you look at 6 o'clock on the diagram, you have customer churn and attrition analysis. So this is building a predictive model to predict which customers are likely to churn based on how much they look like past customers who've churned. And this, of course, helps with retention. Now, if you look at all of the arrows in the middle of this diagram, you'll quickly see that there are a lot of interdependencies between these techniques. You might start by building one of these models, but eventually you'll have a lot of these models and they may inform each other or work together to drive some sort of experience, some sort of insights-driven experience for your customers. Before we move off this slide, I'll just say that in terms of my own inquiry volume at Forrester, when clients call me up and say, hey, Brandon, I need help with something analytics related, I get more inquiries on segmentation than any of these other techniques. And that may be interesting to many of you because you're thinking, well, segmentation's been around for a long time. We have segmentation down pat, but segmentation has changed quite a bit as you've gotten access to more real-time dynamic customer data. Old school kind of static rules-based demographic segmentation doesn't cut it anymore, and so you need to use more analytics on that dynamic data set to create better, more real-time, actionable segments on your customers.
So, Brandon, before we move to Pinwheel also, I have to say, you know, I've been working with analysts for 25 plus years in my career, and I think you're different than most analysts in that you didn't stop at one or two of these labels and then writing endless reports on them, but you connected these in a way that I think is really meaningful. So if anyone on the call has not already screenshotted this, you should. This is so valuable to understand because we throw, vendors are guilty of this, analysts do a lot of this, and often practitioners throw around these big words like, churn and attrition analysis or next best action analysis. But to really understand what next best action, what enriches that, what improves that, what strengthens that, you're going to get into this. You see, if you follow those arrows away from next best action, which is what it's like 905, moving the arrows coming into that, you see data from all these channels. And I want to applaud that this is, many analysts do a lot of actionable work, but this to me is so actionable for anybody who's a pro in this space to really get a deeper understanding of. It's not just about a model. It's not about hey, I keep hearing this word, so I'm going to go learn how to do churn and attrition analysis or to do some propensity modeling. It's really about understanding how it fits into the bigger picture. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Jeff. And that's actually a great lead-in. As you mentioned, there are so many arrows that I think next best action is the receiver of inputs from many more of these techniques than anything else, right? And so I started thinking as I was doing this research into the individual techniques. At some point, companies, and some are already really good at this, but many companies are going to have all of these models, or at least all of the ones that are most valuable and relevant to them, right? And all of these models create very rich insights on customers. But those insights may actually lead companies in different directions as far as what that customer experience could be. And so I realized there was a need for a kind of a new paradigm in the market. And so I borrowed from an old paradigm, the next slide, which is the next best paradigm. We've all heard of next best product, next best offer, and next best action. But I thought it needed a bit of an update for this new world we're in. And hence the emergence of the term next best experience. And the reason that next best experience differs from the three next bests that preceded it is, first of all, they were very much created and delivered in a marketing context for marketers' goals. We want to sell more products through this next best product or offer. With next best experience, that experience that you deliver could be a marketing experience, but it could also be a customer service experience or some sort of product experience or some educational experience about the products and services a customer already owns. So you need to combine data from multiple different business domains or silos within the business to flesh out this holistic view of the customer. And then you need to be able to deliver the experience across those domains in an agnostic way. The execution mindset is also a bit different here because instead of just saying, what have you done for me lately, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, you're also saying, okay, what is the customer trying to achieve with us in this moment or in this interaction? So that's an outside-in perspective as well. Now, companies still want to be profitable. So you need some sort of metric that balances what a customer would like to do and customer loyalty and also profitability to optimize towards. And the next best experience research says that that metric should be customer lifetime value. And when I talk about customer lifetime value, I mean the future profitability of an existing customer or new customer. But what does that forward profitability look like into the future? And with next best experience, you're trying to, yes, retain that profitability, but in some cases, you may actually sacrifice a short-term conversion for longer-term loyalty that leads to a longer lifetime and therefore lifetime value. This may sound very esoteric right now or theoretical, so let me show you what an example of this could look like. On the next slide, Jeff, we have, I'll just talk very quickly through. In one case, you may have a model with churn. We talked about churn analytics that says a customer is 90% likely of churning. And you may also know that the customer has a 90% likelihood of needing a certain product or service of yours. So on the one hand, you could send that customer retention incentive. On the other, you could send that customer an offer for that product. But you may also have seen on that customer's journey that they struggled with something. So you know that they may also need some sort of proactive customer service experience. What do you do when you have these very kind of salient insights into what the customer needs? Do you retain them? Do you try to sell them another product? Or do you reach out and fix their product? Well, Next Best Experience says, look at past customers who've been at a similar crossroads. Look at what the average impact on their lifetime value was given those three different treatments or experiences, and pick the one that has the highest average impact, positive impact on lifetime value. It could very well be servicing them, fixing their problem, because that's going to engender the type of loyalty that will encourage them to increase their footprint and therefore their lifetime and lifetime value.
I really like that, Brandon, and I you know, my eye went right to the experience optimization time frame long term, and my first reaction to that was that that you had a long time frame to optimize the experience. But what you just shared, right, refutes that it's not that you have a long time frame. Often the window to optimize the next best experience is milliseconds from the prior interaction that was maybe poor. So I really like that that paradigm. So thank you for sharing this. I think this is another one. If you didn't take a screenshot of this, by the way, you don't need to take screenshots of any of these. We're going to send you out a link to the recording of this. But I always take screenshots just in case when I'm in these kinds of things. So I think this is a really productive one. Now we're going to get into this research project that I mentioned earlier that we commissioned, Brandon. And maybe you could just share a little bit about the project, kind of what the framing of this was, and then we'll get into some of the things we learned.
Yeah. So, Jeff, I was really excited to get to work on this project with you because, as you know, we got to survey people about this hypothesis that we had, which is a hypothesis that I share with Adobe. So I was really excited to either validate or disprove it. This is the white paper that you all will receive for attending Firms Brace for the Quake with Customer Journey Analytics. Let's talk a little bit about what the hypotheses were going in that we set out to prove. So Adobe commissioned us, Forrester, to understand the role of analytics, not just in what happened last year, but beyond. I think if there's one thing that the past year showed to customer analytics leaders is that you have to be able to understand what's happening with your customer base and respond in real time. So you were right, Jeff. We talk a lot about perishable insights at Forrester. I mean, a lot of insights have a very short shelf life. And so you need to be able to pick up on that signal very quickly and respond to it. And so what the hypothesis of this research was going in is that companies need to detect and adapt to changes in consumer behavior, that is imperative. And so to survive and manage through this period, companies must, one, prioritize the analysis of digital data sources. If you think about what happened last year, the data customers were generating through their interactions with you was primarily digital, and digital sources are the first ones to pick up changes in customer behavior. Companies need to adopt customer journey analytics, and if you don't know what that is, we'll explain it in a second. But as one of the core customer analytics techniques that yields value. And finally, because of these changes, that if companies who already have predictive models must retrain them because they have to incorporate data that reflects this new normal of customer behavior changes. And customer behavior changes could be something as significant as everybody being locked down, but it could also be other exogenous factors in the market. Like new competitive products or a new experience that you've rolled out for your customers. And so we conducted the survey with this to prove this hypothesis. We sent it to we got 591 global customer analytics decision makers at large and mid-sized firms to respond. On the next slide, I won't go too deeply into the makeup of the respondents. I'll just say pretty good geographic distribution. In terms of company revenue, I mentioned mid-sized and large companies at Forrester. When we talk about enterprises, we define enterprises $1 billion and above. So you can see there that 64% of the respondents were enterprises. And then a pretty good distribution of industries. I should have mentioned in my intro that I'm industry agnostic. I cover customer analytics for any and all industries, including even the public sector as well. And then respondents were relatively high level in their organizations. And you can see here the roles. We also had a pretty good distribution of roles. These are decision makers for customer analytics. So you can see where folks are investing in customer analytics. There's no one center of gravity there. There's IT, there's business intelligence and centralized kind of data science and analytics teams. CX, certainly marketing that has a lot of customer data and many use cases for customer analytics. So this capability resides in multiple different business functions.
So Brandon, I probably should have set up a little bit more how
Yeah.
we thought about this as well, but I'll just share that, from our perspective at Adobe, we have, we at this time last year, like many, like everyone, we wondered how would the pandemic impact our business, right? We'd all just retired to our homes, right, to work for who knows how long, and we wondered how things were going to go. And what we found was, especially in the business I'm in, you could look at what we do in Adobe Experience Cloud and the Experience Cloud business at Adobe. Look at that as infrastructure software, and generally think, okay, infrastructure projects are likely to be paused while this pandemic goes on. And so we were nervous that might be the case. However, there's also strong historical precedents for brands who invest during difficult times in marketing, specifically, coming out much stronger on the other end. So we sort of, I think, we had data that said that there was a chance this could happen. We didn't know what would happen, and sure enough, it played out that the smartest brands and even some of the most impacted brands, some of the most impacted industries like travel and hospitality, we saw some of those organizations double down on their investment, increase their investment, push to higher levels of technology to help them drive more maturity in their analytics practices. And so part of what we were trying to ask in this survey is why? What is it you're hoping to gain from this? Or why might you do this, or why might you not invest more heavily during these kinds of times? And how do you believe these kinds of technology will help serve you through these times? So the natural kind of place where this kind of research might go, right, and did go, one of the places is to a question of, hey, how critical are the different tools that you all have? And then how effective are you as an organization at using the tools? So Brandon, maybe you can walk the audience through what we learned about those questions.
Yeah. So this was one of my favorite data points from our survey. If you go to the next slide, there's a few different dimensions here. First of all, you'll notice that there's a gap, right? So what we're asking folks is, how critical are the following tools to achieving your marketing objectives? And that is represented by the longer gray bars. And then, to what extent is your organization's customer analytics solution effective at the following? And the green bar are folks who said it, that these different types of analysis or tools are very effective. Let's talk about those gray bars first, the criticality. If you see, these are the most critical things: customer journey analytics, cross-platform analytics, predictive website, mobile analytics, in descending order. It's really interesting because when I think about, okay, how do you want to get to journey analytics, which is a key, essential piece of that next best experience paradigm I mentioned before? Well, you need all of these other things. And companies typically start with specific channel analytics, mobile app analytics, website analytics. Once they have a preponderance of that type of analytics, or they get that down pat, then they start to turn to predictive analytics. And eventually they'll turn to cross-platform analytics as well, trying to actually analyze how the customer behaves across different platforms or channels. And then finally, that's a necessary precursor for journey analytics, which is being able to track the customer or customers across multiple different interaction points within their journeys. So that's the first thing that stands out to me. The second piece is, of course, the effectiveness, which is much lower, right? Everything's about 25 to 33% here. What's interesting is that predictive analytics companies are the most effective at out of these 5 different techniques. And that's interesting to me because a few years ago that wouldn't have been the case, but thankfully to vendors like Adobe and other vendors in the market, there's been a democratization of a lot of the predictive analytics, so you don't necessarily have to go out and have a team of these rare data scientists building you predictive models. A lot of these tools come with predictive scores out of the box. Finally, the main point of this slide is that gap, and I call that the frustration gap, right? Because these companies understand the importance of these techniques, how critical they are to be able to understand what's happening with their customer base and respond to those changes in real time. But about half of them would say that they're effective at it. And so there's a real gap there.
So that doesn't surprise me, given the, I've worked with this audience for a long time. You come from this audience and have worked with them for a long time. I think there's a tendency in professionals in this space to be humble, but also to be very pragmatic. So it doesn't surprise me that they would say their effectiveness is lagging the importance. But can you talk, Brandon? Do you have an idea of like when they say that it's not very effective? Is that across the sum of people, process, and technologies, or do you have a sense for whether that's focused in one of those three areas more?
Yeah, I certainly do. What we find at Forrester is that the first obstacle most companies face with doing analytics is a data obstacle, and that is, year in, year out in our own research, we find that companies say that accessing data from multiple sources and ensuring data quality from multiple sources are the top two challenges that they face with even doing analytics. And so without being able to access data from multiple sources, you can't do, or from a source, you can't do website analytics or mobile app analytics, let alone cross-platform analytics, right? So usually the companies are kind of stuck in these data doldrums when they're just getting started with customer analytics. And that's where the bulk of the market is today, the folks who are just getting started. Now, there is a tranche of companies who have gotten beyond that, who have solved some of their data challenges, and they actually run into more people and process challenges. So they have a more holistic view of the customer. They're building some of the models that I talked about before, but then they face what we call the insights to action gap, where they have a data science team maybe that's created a model, but when they bring the model to marketing, marketing doesn't understand it, or it's not the model that marketing wanted, or maybe marketing didn't ask for it in the first place. Marketing could be replaced with CX or any other business function. But there's problems, cultural problems and just process problems with the way that analytics are developed. And so companies are working on overcoming that barrier as well.
Yeah, I think when I talk to analysts, if they got paid by the insight, right, they could make millions of dollars, all of them. The challenge is, how do you get those insights? How do you prioritize them, right? How do you decide which are going to be the most important? I think that would take us back to the pinwheel to some degree too, to understand like what is the hierarchy and the order of things. So that's a separate webinar. We'll have to come back to that one, but a fascinating topic. And I think for anyone who this resonates with, I think it's one of the biggest things we're trying to help our customers sort out is how do we get access to all that data. And so we did take a look. This is sort of one of the vectors of the report. And we looked at this, the difference between sort of customer journey analytics and cross-platform analytics. Maybe you could kind of explain how you think about the two, and then kind of what we learned about them.
Sure, yeah. So I promised I would explain these things, and they are tightly intertwined. Journey analytics, if we go to the next slide, is a combination of quantitative and qualitative data to analyze customer behaviors and motivations across touch points and over time to optimize customer interactions, predict future behavior. You think about journey mapping, which has been around for quite some time. Well, what journey analytics does is it takes quantitative timestamp data and actually quantifies the number of customers who go on different journeys and what those journeys are, and and helps you identify where there are significant pain points or journeys that might be working well that you want to migrate other customers onto. But of course, to be able to do that, you need to have a pretty good idea of how customers are interacting across different channels. And that's where cross-platform analytics is. A lot of the analytics, unfortunately, that's happening in companies today is very siloed, looking at a single channel's performance. Cross-platform analytics identifies that customer across different channels or platforms to see how that customer is behaving and how those channels are working in conjunction towards some sort of customer or business objective. And one of the things that we asked in this survey was, okay, what benefits are you getting from the companies who have already adopted journey analytics and cross-platform analytics? What benefits are you seeing from this? And so for journey analytics, the companies who have adopted customer journey analytics are seeing increased revenue. So the ability to take your existing customer base and sell them more. Or if you're doing journey analytics on the path to purchase, the ability to optimize that path to purchase, right? To acquire more customers and a higher value customer. Increasing customer loyalty, so finding the journeys that yield more loyalty that leads to longer retention. Customer engagement, lifetime value. Well, if you're increasing loyalty, increasing revenue, it stands to reason that lifetime value as a function of those things would increase as well. Certainly increasing customer satisfaction. In many companies, journey analytics is performed by customer experience leaders who are very interested in, okay, what are the points in the journey where we're not meeting our customers' expectations, and we need to improve the customer experience and therefore improve satisfaction. So the 31% at the bottom, differentiated experience from competitors, that one's really interesting to me because as products become more commoditized in certain industries, the best way to differentiate and to win and serve and retain customers is through customer experience. And customer experiences are made up of journeys, and so journey analytics can actually help you to innovate and create differentiation amongst a commodity or within a commoditized industry. And you can see here this call out, firms with journey analytics are 1.3 times as likely to say that they realized a differentiated experience compared to non-journey analytics adopters.
Really?
And yeah, it's very interesting. So I've always been bullish on journey analytics, but this kind of puts a very fine point in it. And the same is true on the next side for cross-platform. You can see many of the same benefits: increased revenue, customer engagement, lifetime value. And here, firms with cross-platform are 1.4 times as likely to say that they realize a differentiated experience from their competitors. I mean, just think about it as an attendee, and as a consumer. When you're interacting with a brand on one channel and you've maybe done some discovery and exploration, and then you move to a different channel for one reason or another, and you have to start over, I mean, that's a terrible experience, right? So brands that can understand that, not only understand that, but make that experience interesting and deliver value back to the customer, that's the type of differentiation that I think is going to help folks succeed in the market.
I 100% agree. I was actually having a customer service interaction just a couple of days ago with a brand, and the only way I couldn't get a hold of them on the phone. I went to their website. Their live chat feature kept just giving me a bot and would never connect to a person. So I did what all of us do in this day and age, and I got on Twitter. I was nice. I DM'd directly. I didn't tweet about what they were doing wrong. I DM'd them, and the DM thread was productive, and then it just died. And
oh my gosh.
A couple days later, I got an email from them saying, hey, we're so sorry that we couldn't solve this on Twitter. What's going on? And it was like, it was two good behaviors and one bad one, right? It was like, great that they recognized it didn't work. Great that they came around through another channel because they knew my email address and hit me up. But too bad that they didn't also bring context over so they knew, so I didn't have to repeat. So, of course, I cut and pasted from Twitter what was going on. And then they sent me a survey asking, can you rate your experience with us on Twitter, right? And so, of course, I destroyed them in their survey. You guys haven't done anything for me. That was a dead end. We went over there. But this is so critical for brands, right, to understand that. So when and Brandon, you tell me if you see it differently. When I think about the difference between CJA, customer journey analytics, and cross-platform, the operative word for me is customer journey is about the touch points generally within a channel, whereas cross-platform is between channels or across multiple channels. Is that an okay shorthand to use for the difference?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Definitely.
So a lot going on here, and by the way, this is it will surprise nobody that these are areas that Adobe is heavily focused in our R&D efforts around, and I'll share some of that in a little bit. But I want to talk about, everybody's saying the world changed in 2020, right? It's kind of almost cliche. It's absolutely true. Nobody refutes it, but there's a couple of areas that we found in the research that specifically helped us understand parts of the world that have changed. And one is some of the shifts in the customer behavioral patterns that inform predictive models. So there was a really interesting insight in the paper around that. And Brandon, maybe you can introduce that one to the audience.
Yeah, sure. As you can see here, the title of this section talks about data drift, and data drift essentially means if you have a predictive model that was trained on a certain type of data, and then that data changes, maybe because the customer behaviors change, well, that predictive model is not going to be very accurate. That's
makes sense, right? A lot of behavior changed in 2020, so we should expect this to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So on the next slide, we actually were able to prove that this happened, and it happened because many companies aren't very effective at capturing digital data sources. And this is shocking to me. You know, I see this every year with our customers, that the companies, when we ask them what types of data they're using for customer analytics, you know, CRM is up there, demographic data is up there, but you know, the fact that there's like 60 or 57% of companies that, you know, aren't using their web data and customer analytics, and e-commerce transaction data, mobile data are even lower. It is pretty amazing to me, because these are very valuable sources of customer data, real-time customer data, customers giving you valuable insights into what they want to achieve with you. And so given the fact that many companies aren't great at capturing and analyzing these digital data sources, we wanted to see, okay, did that have an impact on their predictive analytics when customer behavior shifted, as Jeff mentioned last year? So let's see what the finding was here. And we found that for the companies who had predictive analytics and they saw this deterioration in the effectiveness of their predictive models, 59% said it was because consumer behaviors changed so dramatically that our training data is outdated. Again, the new normal was not reflected by that past training data. 32% said explicitly it's because we don't have sufficient digital data sources. We were training our models on CRM data or other data sources that are relatively static and couldn't actually capture the new changes in customer behavior. And finally, 35% said that they're not able to handle the changing volume of digital engagement. Companies saw almost an overnight increase, right, Jeff, in the amount of digital traffic from their customers, and not everybody was adequately equipped to deal with that new scale.
Yeah, big time increases. If anyone, I mean, everyone on the call who's a practitioner in this space experienced it, but for those who don't know, we manage, we provide analytics technologies to some of the biggest retail brands, and so Black Friday, Cyber Monday, kind of holiday shopping season is a huge spike in volume for Adobe Analytics, and we saw a similar type of spike last March, and then it was sustained. So it spiked up to Black Friday levels and stayed there for months. So yeah. Huge shifts in the amount of data that was available, but not everybody, like you said, had tools that could scale to that.
Yeah, in terms of delivering the experience, and then also, as we're talking about, analyzing what those new behaviors were amongst this huge volume of interaction.
Yep, totally agree.
And then we wanted to get a little bit deeper into the individual sources of data that were helping companies achieve better accuracy in their predictive models. So we asked, which of the following data sources does your organization use to inform customer analytics? And then we cut by the folks whose models are more accurate versus folks whose models are less accurate. So overall, I think the takeaway from this slide is that these sources, many of them digital data sources, lead to greater accuracy in predictive modeling. Look at mobile, for example. You know, companies who have mobile, adopted mobile, within their predictive models are 44% of them have more accurate predictive models because of that.
And it's intuitive, right? I mean, this at the end of the day, this is statistics. So when sample size grows massively, right, your accuracy goes way up. So
Yeah.
That's awesome. So then this is a little bit of a shift now. Well, actually, let me back up. I want to go back 2 slides. I just want to share, we have customers who are buying our customer journey analytics products, and it's interesting. Well, actually, let me even back up more. When I mentioned my situation from Twitter to my email box with that customer, if they were relying on an agent who was managing the Twitter feed to put something in the CRM next to my name, right, that didn't happen, right? Had that happened, or had they pulled the social media data into the CRM, they would have known how to handle the email interaction with me. And so this illustrates, the experience I had with that brand the other day is well illustrated here in this gap in the data. And so when we talk with our customers about what data sets do they want to see mashed up, right? What kind of 2 different channels of experience do they want to see combined together, sequenced together, so they see sort of that ebb and flow of their customers. And it should be no surprise that, most of our customers will start with web data and digital data, and then they want to add customer relationship management data, demographic data. These are super, super popular ones. Loyalty and point of sale data are very popular as well. And more connected device, ad impression, email data. So every single thing on this list, I mean, again, data people will never want less data. So everybody wants everything on this list. But the high priority things, it turns out, are CRM, commerce, point of sale. Those are the top things that customers are pulling into their recipes with Adobe. So that kind of leads to this question of, okay, I want to get there, right? I want to get to customer journey analytics and cross-device analytics, but how do I get there? And the 2 prevailing approaches are to buy something from a vendor, what we call do it for me, right? I think this is your term, and versus do it yourself, roll your own. And so we actually studied that a little bit as well in the research, and I'll let you walk the audience through that.
Yeah, this was another hypothesis I wanted to test along with you guys, Jeff, because I do see these 2 approaches: companies that have invested in building out data science teams to build this stuff from scratch versus companies that will work with a vendor like Adobe to get the analytics from a product. So let's take a look at some of these findings. So the decision here is whether to buy or build. Well, we asked folks what they find most challenging when it comes to customer analytics, and we split the responses by folks who have adopted a do-it-for-me approach. So they've partnered with a vendor, solutions vendor, or folks who have a homegrown do-it-yourself approach where they roll up their sleeves and try to build this. So buy in the dark blue versus build in the light blue. And what we found, and this is not surprising to me, but it was nice to be able to quantify this, is that there are a lot of gaps among companies who try to build this themselves around things like knowledge sharing and democratizing access to insights across the team, acting on insights from data. All of this is kind of harkens back to that insights to action gap that I mentioned before. When you have a team of expert data scientists who are very focused on building models, that's great, but ensuring that the insights from those models actually get disseminated to the right other people in the organization in a way that is comprehensible and actioned upon, that's a tall order without another technology to do that, right? There's the technology used to actually build the insight, and then there's the technology used to disseminate it, and another one to action it. And so that's where these teams fall down. Operationalizing these things, also managing a backlog of requests or customization for business needs becomes difficult as well. I mean, oftentimes to create one model could take up to three or even 6 months for these teams. So there ends up being a large backlog.
This was actually not surprising for me, but like you, I was very interested in seeing it quantified. I think, there's organizational behavioral threads through this, right, that vendors can't solve, and you can't solve internally as well, where on some level, if you're trying to compel someone to do something based on data, the core question ends up being, how good is that data? Where did it come from? Do I trust the team, the algorithm, the tools, et cetera, that were behind it? And so this becomes more of a challenge for homegrown, right? Because it's harder to bring stakeholders along the insights journey, right? And we find a lot when we talk to our customers that if they don't bring sort of non-quants along the journey, often they're suspicious of the end insights. And just think about it in your own life. If someone said the black box told us we should do this differently, you're going to ask, who's the black box to tell me what to do, right? And so this can become really challenging. And it's not to say that if the black box has a brand name on it, that's necessarily different. But I think more of these things at the top of the list around, how much did we let them into the process? How much did we bring stakeholders along with us as we discovered these insights, as opposed to just springing them on them? So I thought this was really interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned trust, Jeff. I mean, a lot of these gaps are trust gaps. Trust not necessarily in the people, but in the insights themselves and the way that they were created.
And you're going to be especially distrustful, right, if the insight is going to be very disruptive to your world, right? If it means you've got the wrong team or you're investing your budget the wrong way, right? Those are things that are pretty hard to stomach, and people will tend to want to make very certain that the insight that they're acting on is solid, and so that can take up a lot of time. Okay, let's go on to this next one.
Yeah. So we also asked folks about the effort involved with the do-it-for-me versus the do-it-yourself approach, and which elements were more expensive than folks expected when they embarked on this journey. And so we looked at things like headcount costs, and you can see, in the do-it-for-me approach, 12% said that the headcount costs were much more expensive versus 11%, so not much of a difference there. The only statistically significant difference that we saw was in upfront headcount. I should say, before I was talking about non-headcount costs, but upfront headcount costs were statistically significantly more expensive for the homegrown or do-it-yourself approach, which makes sense, right? You're hiring a lot of specialists to do this for you, and that ends up being an expensive endeavor.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically becoming a software company on some level with this stuff, right? And so that's not surprising. I think upfront non-headcount costs for do-it-for-me, right? That's probably, I'd characterize that as the implementation cost more, took longer, et cetera, right, than we expected. It's hard to avoid that, but one definitely that experienced practitioners have learned to manage over time. Certainly hope that that's not in reference to consulting work we've done. And then let's look at this last one.
So who's using free tools versus paid tools? Well, you can see here a super majority are using paid tier tools. Only 10% of the companies of the 591 respondents said that they're using a free tier solution for customer analytics. 90% are paying for their customer analytics solution. Okay.
So I'm going to pivot, Brandon, for a minute. I want to just share some of how we're thinking about these problems as one of these vendors, right? As one of these do-it-for-me vendors. And if we have time, we can come back and talk about a couple other topics. So I'm just going to jump here to how Adobe's thinking about this. And I promise, hopefully this won't come across as a sales pitch. It's intended to give you an understanding of where we're investing from an R&D standpoint and where Adobe's headed. Those of you who have been around Adobe for a while, you know that our mission is to change the world through digital experiences. And what that means, or where our role in that, is that every digital experience touches one of these things for almost any brand. At a minimum, you've tuned up a photograph in Photoshop, but you may also be doing digital signatures or document sharing in Acrobat. By the way, not to leave all the other great creative tools out, but just an example of what's part of Creative Cloud and Document Cloud. And of course, there are other great things in our Experience Cloud, but we're talking about analytics today. And so these things all have a role to play in digital experiences. And specifically, we've been focusing in Adobe Analytics on customer journey analytics, right? That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone given what we've been talking about. But the three big things that customers have been asking us for that we are sought to and continue to seek to solve for them is, number one, making those insights accessible to all. We just talked about the need for data democratization and that comparison of DIY and DIFM models. The second is to understand the customer in a journey context. And again, apropos given what we're talking about, and that means understanding, of course, within a channel what the journey looks like, but then as customers interact with you across multiple channels, whether it's social channels, email channels, web, mobile app, in-store, etc., understanding that sequential view is so critical for brands to get the experience right. And then finally, data science for the masses is an important innovation vector for Adobe, right? We certainly want to meet the needs of data scientists, but like I said earlier, if you don't bring business stakeholders along the journey, and if you don't give them the ability to also go in and manipulate the data and gain their own insights from it, then you miss out on a huge aspect of sort of the way people behave that will lead you to really attacking what Brandon called that insights to action gap. And so these are three, there are others, but these are the three of the biggest challenges customers were asking us to go address with customer journey analytics. And so we shipped this a little over a year ago, and we're delivering these things. I won't read the slide to folks, but these are some really important things. I mentioned when we talked about long-term versus short-term, that triggered for me the question of the time to insights, kind of the stopwatch view of time to insights. And you think about, and I'm talking about this third bullet here on the right, you think about what happens to your time to insights when the data is 3, 4, 5, 10 times deep as it was before, right? When a pandemic happens like this, that happens to spike your data, you can grind your insights engine to a halt just because systems weren't designed to work with 10 times as much data, and this has been a critical innovation vector for us. Certainly, I kind of covered easy for non-analysts, and if you haven't seen how simple the experience is to use in customer journey analytics, which is all based on our analysis workspace experience, then it's worthwhile to get a demo. But I wanted to really land on this, which is an understanding of our innovation vision, because for customers who have been with us for a while, most of our customers have Prime, and we've had huge growth in Ultimate and customer journey analytics. And to some, those have been seen as sort of the top of the mountain. And nothing could be further from the truth. There are enhancements to customer journey analytics with attribution AI and customer AI that help you get into propensity modeling and really customized advanced attribution modeling using AI and ML. Those are kind of some of the next tiers. But then the R&D work is very focused on these other 4 areas. Prediction next best, which you heard Brandon speak to a lot. Segments and audiences. Like Brandon, we hear this a lot from our customers, so working on a lot of innovation there. More on multi-channel journeys. We'll never be done with this, right? When you think about the concept of omni-channel, it's sort of like, it's more of a vector than it is a destination, right? You never will have data from all of the channels that you want, because there's always going to be a new channel or a new tool that's created a silo that you need to pull that data out of. And so that's an area we'll continuously be investing in. Marketing performance, what's sort of a broader umbrella term that includes attribution, but really asks questions about how is the marketing performing, what should get credit for what, where should we shift investments and divest. And then a new area for us, a newer research area, which you've probably heard our CEO, Shantanu Narayan, talk about, is the role we can play in really running the data-driven business. So this gets into data-driven operating models, run the business types of scorecards, an understanding of movers, and better tools for executive decision makers to really moderate that question of, okay, you've brought me an insight. And attached to that insight is a prescription, but actually it's not one prescription you brought me 7 prescriptions, and I can afford to do 2. Which 2 should I do? And that ends up being a very common conversation among leaders all over the industry, and it's an area we think we have some unique perspectives on and some unique research that we can bring to bear there. So, Brandon, I'm going to make another kind of big pivot. That's, by the way, for those of you who were opening your email during that because you didn't want to hear the Adobe commercial. The commercial's over. And there's one other topic we wanted to talk about, if we can squeeze it in, and that's the question of kind of what do we know about the future of cookies and how the industry is going cookieless. So I'm going to jump back over there, and Brandon, if you can talk about what we learned about adapting to the cookieless future.
Yeah, sure. So what we know is that third-party cookies. And so, yeah, Google Chrome is deprecating third-party cookies next year. So how do you prepare for this? Well, first of all, let's understand what third-party cookies are. So companies typically have 3, maybe 4 types of data, actually. Forrester does talk quite a bit about zero-party data, which is data that customers willingly and consensually share with you, knowing that you're going to use it to provide a better experience for them. First-party data is what a lot of my research, the bedrock of a lot of those customer analytics techniques that I talked about before, data that you collect on your interactions and transactions with your customers. Second-party data would be that first-party data from a publisher or advertiser that they share in a data management platform. And finally, third-party data, which is really what we're talking about in this cookieless future, is data collected using these third-party tags that track customers across different points on their digital journeys. So they provide insights into customer affinity, what they're browsing, their different preferences. So today, third-party data is being used in DMPs or data management platforms, often in conjunction with first and second-party data through onboarding and identity management solutions, as you can see here. And DMPs are using this to activate audiences through lookalike modeling, show insights into different audiences, to syndicate audiences, and to basically create segments, in some cases segments that would be a combination of first and third-party data. So what does this cookieless future look like? Well, it doesn't mean that this whole system is going away. It's just on the next slide, the cookie monster is going to come in and gobble up that piece of it. So you'll still have access to first and second party data. DMPs will continue to exist and do what they do, but you'll need to be able to find ways to do lookalike modeling, audience insights, etc., without that data that you were getting from third-party cookies. So we have some advice at Forrester for companies who are trying to navigate what to do in this cookieless future. The first 3 pieces of advice are really about your DMP strategy. So the first thing I would say is just review your current DMP's vision and roadmap. So ask whoever your current DMP is how it's going to activate targeted audiences without the third-party data it used to rely on. Does it have plans to be able to activate through CRM touchpoints like email? Also test non-cookie-based audience insights and segmentation. Even though Cookie Monster gobbled up that third-party piece, not all data within a DMP is based on third-party cookies. Some third-party data is actually first-party or second-party data that you'll still have access to. And finally, you could reach out to premium publishers like the New York Times or Condé Nast to partner with them and access, build, and syndicate audiences using your DMP through their sites. Second, what you can start to do internally right now is audit first, second, and third-party data usage. So take an inventory of the different data that you're using and see what pieces are going to be most impacted and what use cases flow out of that data. This is the one that I stress the most because most of my customer analytics techniques revolve around first-party data. So build out those first-party data assets. And then finally, do some testing, run 2 campaigns, one with third-party cookie data and one without, and see where the vulnerabilities lie and where the greatest difference is, and know that, okay, this is the place where we're going to have to shore up our capabilities.
That's awesome. I appreciate that, Brandon. I think our audience will appreciate it as well. This is a topic that everybody's going to have an answer to. So as we close, we covered a lot of topics. I think a lot of really interesting things, Brandon. And I think for the audience, I think that the imperative here has to be, if you're not thinking about customer journey analytics, you need to be thinking about it, and hopefully this paper will guide how people think about what others are doing and how they can avoid some of the pitfalls. Any closing comments, Brandon, before we turn it back to Jeff?
Just thank you so much for having me, and I hope everybody enjoys the paper, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you, Brandon. Really appreciate your time. And with that, we'll turn it back to our producer, Jeff Anderson.
Thank you so much, Jeff Allen. Thank you, Brandon. Thanks to Rick for doing yeoman's work answering audience questions during the session. As we mentioned at the top, we weren't sure if we would have time to do a dedicated Q&A, and we didn't because we had so much great content to share with you today. But I know Rick interacted with a lot of you in chat during the session, and we will make sure, as I said at the beginning, to get back to any of you offline afterwards that we weren't able to respond to during the session. So as I mentioned earlier, please be on the lookout for the follow-up email that will have a link to it'll have a link to the recording of this webinar, and it'll also have a PDF attachment of the report that Brandon and Jeff were talking about during the session today. So we're over time though, so we're going to go ahead and sign off now. So again, thanks to Jeff, Brandon, Rick, but most of all, thanks to you for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate it. Depending on where you are in the world, we wish you a good rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, and look forward to having you join us on future Adobe webinars. Stay safe and healthy, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everyone.